Evelyn Harper had always found comfort in the quiet rhythm of her life. Every morning she woke up to the soft light filtering through the tall oak trees that lined the edges of her land, stretching across nearly 50 acres at the outskirts of the town of Willow Creek. This land had been in her family for 3 generations, passed down from her grandfather to her father, and then to her. To Evelyn, it was more than just property. It was a place of memories, a sanctuary where she could breathe deeply and feel connected to the earth. For years, she had cared for the land with gentle hands. She had planted wildflowers near the creek, tended to the small vegetable garden behind her cozy cabin, and spent afternoons reading on the wooden bench under the largest maple tree. The peaceful sounds of birdsong and rustling leaves were the soundtrack to her days. But on this particular morning, something was different. The calm was broken by a low rumble that grew louder and louder. As Evelyn stepped outside to investigate, she saw a cloud of dust rising in the distance near the southern boundary of her land. Curious, she grabbed her jacket and walked toward the noise, her heart quickening with a strange mix of anticipation and unease. As she drew closer, the source of the disturbance came into view. Bright yellow machines rumbled over the earth, uprooting trees and leveling patches of ground. Workers moved with purpose, carrying tools and blueprints, marking the soil with stakes and spray paint. The air was thick with the smell of fresh-cut wood and engine oil. Evelyn stopped short, blinking in disbelief. There, where only moments ago stood tall pines and wild shrubs, were foundations for houses, 35 of them neatly lined up, in rows like dominoes ready to fall. Rows of half-built houses, some with walls framed, others already fitted with windows. Her breath caught. She had never given anyone permission to build on her land. No letters, no phone calls, no signs of approval, nothing. "Excuse me?" She called out to a man in a bright orange vest who was directing a bulldozer. "Whose land is this?" The man paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "This is the new Willow Creek development," he said, nodding toward the cluster of houses. "We're building affordable homes for families moving into the area." Evelyn's hands tightened into fists. "But this is my land. I own this property." The man shrugged. "Sorry, ma'am. I'm just the foreman. I'll have to talk to the Homeowners Association or the developers about that." Evelyn's mind raced. The Homeowners Association. She had been part of the HOA meetings before, but nothing had been mentioned about this. Had she missed some announcement? Was this some kind of mistake? Determined to find answers, Evelyn walked back to her cabin and immediately dialed the HOA office. The receptionist was polite but gave no helpful information. She was told that the land had been sold and approved for development, but no specifics were offered. Feeling a growing sense of confusion, Evelyn decided to visit the town's land registry office the next day. She wanted to see the official documents, hoping to understand how this could have happened without her knowledge. That night, she sat on her porch, watching the sun set behind the hills. The newly cleared earth glowed golden, a stark contrast to the deep green forest that had stood there just hours before. The peaceful land she had cherished was changing fast. Evelyn's mind was a whirlwind of questions. How could this be happening? Who had sold her land? Was it possible someone had forged documents? Or was it a bureaucratic error? She knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to give up without a fight. The next morning, Evelyn packed a notebook, a camera, and a flashlight into her backpack. She planned to document everything: the construction, the land, the houses. She needed evidence to understand what was really going on and how to protect her family's legacy. As she walked back toward the construction site, she felt a quiet determination settle over her. This land had been her family's home for decades. It held stories, memories, and the roots of generations, and now, Evelyn was ready to stand guard over it. The next morning, Evelyn woke with a sense of urgency. The sky was still tinged with soft pinks and blues, but the machines had already begun their work. She slipped into her boots, grabbed her backpack filled with notebook, camera, and a thermos of coffee, and headed toward the construction site. As she neared the edge of the development, the scale of the project became clearer. The 35 houses were no longer just frames. Many had roofs, windows, even freshly painted doors. Streets and sidewalks were carved out, and small front yards were beginning to take shape. What had seemed distant and uncertain the day before now felt overwhelming. Evelyn paused on a gentle hill overlooking the site, her eyes scanning the rows of houses stretching farther than she had realized. It wasn't just a handful of buildings. It was a whole new neighborhood, creeping into the land that had been so quiet and untouched for decades. She took out her camera and began snapping photos, making sure to capture the boundaries where the new development met her remaining forested land. Every shot felt like evidence of something deeply wrong. A man in a crisp suit and polished shoes approached, holding a clipboard and speaking in a calm, measured voice. "Excuse me, ma'am? I'm Jacob Wells, project manager for this development. Can I help you?" Evelyn steadied her voice. "This is my land. I never gave permission for this construction. How is this possible?" Jacob gave a polite smile. "I understand your concerns. The land was purchased legally from the previous owner. All necessary permits were approved by the town and the Homeowners Association. We've followed every step required." Evelyn's brow furrowed. "Previous owner, that was my father's land. He never sold it. I'm the sole owner now." Jacob shifted slightly. "The paperwork shows a sale completed 6 months ago. I'm sorry if there's been confusion. I suggest you speak with the Homeowners Association or the town's land office to clarify." Determined not to back down, Evelyn asked, "May I see those documents? The sale papers, permits, anything that proves this." Jacob hesitated, then said, "Those are held by the Homeowners Association and the town. I don't have copies with me, but I can help you set up a meeting." Evelyn nodded, feeling the weight of bureaucracy pressing down on her. She made a mental note to visit the town office again and requested contact information for the HOA board. As Jacob walked away, Evelyn noticed a group of new homeowners touring the area with a real estate agent. The families looked excited, pointing out house features and imagining their futures there. It was bittersweet for Evelyn. She wanted to share in their joy. But this was not the way she had hoped the land would change. Later that afternoon, Evelyn returned to her cabin and began poring over the documents she had gathered so far. She reviewed the property maps, her grandfather's old land deed, and the few papers she had received when her father passed the land on to her. Something wasn't right. The recorded sale that Jacob mentioned did not appear in the official land registry. The date on the document he cited was suspiciously recent. Yet no one had informed her or sent her any notice. She felt a growing unease. Could someone have forged her signature? Or slipped through a loophole to claim ownership without her knowledge? With a deep breath, Evelyn decided her next step would be to visit the town's clerk office first thing the following morning. She wanted to request a formal search of all transactions related to her land. And maybe, just maybe, find out the truth. That evening, as she walked through the remaining wooded area behind her cabin, Evelyn reflected on the memories her family had made here. The summer picnics, the quiet winter nights by the fire, the stories her grandfather told about planting each tree. She wasn't ready to let all of that go. The land felt alive beneath her feet, whispering a promise. Hold on, fight for what is yours. And Evelyn was ready. The morning air was crisp as Evelyn Harper stepped into the town clerk's office, clutching her notebook and a folder filled with old family documents. The building was modest but busy, a place where official business quietly kept the town running. She approached the counter, where a friendly clerk greeted her with a polite smile. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you today?" the clerk asked. Evelyn took a deep breath. "I'm here to review the land records for a property I own on the edge of town. I need to see any recent transactions or changes in ownership." The clerk nodded and guided her to a small reading room filled with filing cabinets and computer terminals. Evelyn settled in, her eyes scanning the records one by one. Months passed as she carefully compared old deeds with the new entries. To her shock, she found a recent transaction she had never been told about, a deed showing the sale of her land to a development company roughly 6 months ago. But the signature wasn't hers. It was faint and shaky, unlike the firm script she used on legal papers. Evelyn felt a cold wave of disbelief. Someone had forged her name. Her heart pounded as she took photos of the documents with her phone, determined to gather every detail. She made notes about the dates, the notary's name, and the company involved. There had to be a way to prove this was illegitimate. Her next step was clear. She needed legal advice. Later that day, Evelyn visited a small law office downtown. She met with a seasoned attorney named Marcus Lee, whose calm demeanor instantly made her feel less alone. "I want to stop the construction on my land," Evelyn explained, laying out the situation. "They built 35 houses without my permission, and there's a deed showing a sale I never authorized." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Forgery is a serious matter, but you have options. We can file a motion to halt construction while we investigate. We'll also send a formal challenge to the deed's validity." Evelyn felt a spark of hope. How long could this take? It depends on the cooperation of the courts and local officials. But we'll do everything to protect your rights. Leaving the office, Evelyn felt a mix of relief and anxiety. The legal road ahead was uncertain, but at least she had a plan. Still, questions swirled in her mind. How had this happened? Who would risk forging documents to sell her land? Was it a mistake or something more deliberate? Determined to find answers, Evelyn began reaching out to neighbors and people involved in the Homeowners Association. She learned that some residents had attended meetings where plans for the new development were discussed. However, none had mentioned the land belonged to her, or that a sale had taken place. One neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Collins, shared a troubling observation. "There were talks about expanding the neighborhood," she said softly, "but I don't remember any clear information about where the land was coming from. It seemed rushed, like someone wanted to get it done quickly." Evelyn listened carefully. This sense of haste matched her suspicions about the forged deed. That evening, back on her porch, Evelyn reviewed her notes. The peaceful land she loved was now caught in a complicated web of paperwork, secrets, and fast-moving construction. But one thing was clear: she wouldn't let her family's legacy be taken without a fight. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Evelyn made a silent promise. To her grandfather's memory, she would protect this land not just for herself, but for the future generations who might one day walk beneath those trees. The search for truth had begun, and Evelyn was ready to see it through. Word of Evelyn's discovery spread quickly. Through Willow Creek, the news that 35 houses had been built or nearly finished on land that belonged to her stirred a quiet buzz in the neighborhood. Evelyn found herself at the center of a story that was bigger than she had imagined. She attended the next Homeowners Association meeting, hoping to find some clarity and perhaps even support. The community center was filled with familiar faces, neighbors she had known for years, as well as new residents drawn by the promise of freshly built homes. As Evelyn stepped up to speak, the room grew quiet. She shared her story clearly and calmly, explaining how the land had been in her family for generations and how the recent construction had taken her by surprise. Some people listened with sympathy, their expressions softening. A few spoke quietly, to each other, nodding in agreement. But others appeared conflicted or uncertain. The excitement of new homes and new neighbors was hard to dismiss. After Evelyn finished, a man in his 40s named Robert stood to speak. "I understand where Evelyn is coming from," he said thoughtfully, "but these homes have brought life to our community. Families are moving in, kids are playing outside, and local businesses are seeing more customers. Several others chimed. In sharing stories about their new neighbors, the growing sense of energy in the area, and the opportunity for better schools and parks, Evelyn listened carefully. She didn't want to stand in the way of progress, but she also wanted to protect what was rightfully hers. The conflicting feelings in the room mirrored her own inner struggle. Later, a woman named Grace approached Evelyn quietly. "I support you," she said, lowering her voice. "This land means a lot to our town's history. We can find a way to grow without losing that." Evelyn felt grateful for the encouragement. Grace and a small group of neighbors agreed to meet regularly to discuss how they might work together to ensure respect for the land. While welcoming new residents, the Homeowners Association board, however, remained firm. They emphasized the legal approvals and permits, insisting the development was properly authorized. They urged everyone to focus on the future and the benefits the new homes would bring. Evelyn found herself navigating a delicate balance between honoring the past and facing a rapidly changing present. Outside the meeting, Evelyn spoke with a few residents individually. Many shared stories of moving to Willow Creek for its natural beauty and community spirit. They were torn, wanting both to preserve that spirit and embrace the new opportunities. That evening, Evelyn walked along the border of her remaining forested land, the sound of children playing faint in the distance from the new neighborhood. The air was filled with the scent of pine and fresh earth. She thought about the years she had spent caring for this land, the small garden where she grew, tomatoes, the wildflowers that bloomed each spring, the creek that wound through the trees. It was more than property. It was a living part of her family's story, determined to find a way forward. Evelyn began making plans to involve the community in protecting what was left. She envisioned gatherings where neighbors could share ideas, volunteer to plant trees, and care for the creek. Her grandfather's words echoed in her mind. Land isn't just about ownership, it's about stewardship, caring for what's given to us. With new resolve, Evelyn reached out to local environmental groups and the town council, hoping to spark conversations that could bring everyone together. Despite the challenges, she felt a growing hope. The story of her land was far from over, and perhaps this was a chance to build something meaningful, a neighborhood where history and growth could coexist. As night fell, Evelyn stood outside her cabin, looking up at the stars shining through the trees. Change was coming, but so was a new chapter, and she was ready to face it. Several days after the Homeowners Association meeting, Evelyn decided to take a walk through the farthest corner of her property, an area she hadn't visited in years. She wanted to clear her mind and think about the next steps. The air was fresh and cool, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and wildflowers. The land felt familiar, yet changed, as the sounds of construction buzzed faintly in the distance. As she wandered deeper into the woods, Evelyn came across a narrow, overgrown path that led toward the old creek she had almost forgotten about. This spot, a place where her grandfather had once built a small dam decades ago. The dam was meant to control the flow of water during heavy rains, protecting the surrounding land from flooding. Curious, she pushed through the brush and soon spotted the moss-covered wooden structure. Time and weather had worn it down, but the dam was still there, holding back the creek in a small, quiet pond. Evelyn ran her hand along the rough, aged planks, remembering the stories her grandfather used to tell her. He had built the dam with his own hands, proud to shape the land in a way that balanced nature and care. It was a piece of family history, a quiet testament to respect for the land. As she stood there, sudden thought struck her. The dam controlled the water that ran through the area where the new houses were being built. If the dam were to be opened, even partially, it could change the flow of water downstream. Evelyn's mind raced with possibilities. The new construction site had been cleared quickly, with little regard for the natural terrain. She had noticed the earth was uneven, and the foundations of the houses looked vulnerable, especially after the recent rains. What if the dam could play a role in protecting the land, or at least in pausing the construction? She took out her phone and snapped several photos of the dam and the surrounding creek. Evelyn made a mental note to research more about the dam's current condition and any regulations related to water control in the area. For the first time since the construction began, Evelyn felt a spark of control. The dam wasn't just an old relic. It was a part of the land's natural balance, a tool that might help her in the days ahead. Over the next few days, Evelyn visited the local library and town offices to gather information about the dam and the creek it controlled. She learned that the dam had never been officially inspected or maintained by the town, and it wasn't listed on recent environmental reports. This lack of oversight worried her. If the dam were to fail during a storm, the new houses downstream could be at risk of flooding. It was a fragile situation. Nature's quiet warning. Evelyn also spoke with a local environmentalist named Rachel, who agreed to visit the site. Together, they examined the dam and discussed its importance. "This dam is part of the land's history," Rachel said thoughtfully. "It controls the creek's flow and protects the surrounding area. If it's damaged or misused, the impact could be serious." Evelyn nodded. "I want to make sure the land and the people living here are safe. Maybe we can work with the community to care for the dam and the creek." Rachel smiled. "Oh, that's a great idea. It could be a way to bring people together, respecting both the environment and the new development." With renewed determination, Evelyn planned to bring this idea to the next community meeting. She hoped it would inspire neighbors and officials. "I like to think carefully about the land's future," as the sky turned golden in the late afternoon. Evelyn stood once again by the dam, watching the creek ripple gently beneath the trees. The land held stories of family, of nature, of change, and now it held a secret that might help her protect what mattered most in the days that followed her discovery of the old dam. Evelyn Harper worked tirelessly to prepare for the challenges ahead. She reached out to the Homeowners Association and town officials, requesting meetings and information. But her inquiries were met mostly with polite deflections and vague assurances. The development was moving fast, and no one seemed eager to slow it down or revisit past decisions. Undeterred, Evelyn leaned on the support of a small but growing group of neighbors who shared her concerns about the land and the rapid changes. Together, they planned a community gathering to discuss ways to protect the environment and honor the land's history. Evelyn hoped this would create a space where voices could be heard, both for progress and preservation. Meanwhile, dark clouds had begun to gather on the horizon, literally and figuratively. The weather forecast predicted heavy rains in the coming days, a reminder that the creek and the old dam might soon face their greatest test in years. Evelyn kept a close eye on the skies, her thoughts heavy with what could happen if the dam failed or if the rain caused problems on the unstable construction site. One afternoon, as she stood near the boundary where the new development met her remaining forest, Evelyn noticed the fresh earth starting to wash away in small rivulets. The heavy rains had already begun to soften the ground, and the unfinished houses, some still missing walls or proper drainage, looked vulnerable. She felt a pang of worry for the families who had recently moved in. Unaware of what might lie ahead, Evelyn called Rachel, the environmentalist, and they met by the creek to assess the situation. Together, they observed how the water was rising steadily behind the old dam. The wooden gates were weathered but still holding firm. "The dam is doing its job," Rachel said, "but it's old and not designed to handle heavy storms after years of little maintenance. If the rain continues, it could overflow or even give way." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "We need a plan, something that can protect both the land and the people." That evening, she drafted letters to the town council and environmental agencies, urging them to inspect the dam and monitor the new construction site during the storm. She sent copies to the Homeowners Association and the developer's office. Despite her efforts, the response was slow and distant. The town assured her they were aware of the weather and had teams ready to respond if needed. But there was no immediate action to inspect the dam or pause construction, as the first drops of rain fell that night. Evelyn stood on her porch, watching the trees sway in the wind. The creek murmured softly in the darkness, a quiet but persistent reminder of nature's presence. Sleep eluded her. Her mind was filled with memories of her grandfather tending to the land. Stories of careful stewardship and respect for nature. She worried about what the next few days would bring. Early the next morning, the rain intensified. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Evelyn donned her raincoat and boots, heading toward the dam to check on its condition. The water level behind it had risen noticeably. Lapping at the wooden planks, she felt a mix of awe and fear. The dam was both a symbol of resilience and vulnerability. Back at the construction site, heavy machinery had stopped for the day, and workers had pulled back to safer ground. The earth was saturated, and the risk of mudslides or flooding was growing. Evelyn's phone buzzed with a message. From Rachel, "We should be ready to act if the dam's pressure increases. Let's keep monitoring closely." As the storm raged, Evelyn felt the weight of responsibilities settling on her shoulders. The peaceful land she had cherished was now at the center of a delicate balance between nature's power, human ambition, and the need for care. She glanced once more at the dam, standing steadfast in the rain, and whispered, "Hold on, we're counting on you." The storm unleashed its full force by late afternoon. The rain fell in relentless sheets, turning the quiet creek into a swelling river. Evelyn stood near the old dam, her coat soaked through, eyes fixed on the dark water that strained against. The weathered wood that dam creaked and groaned under the pressure, its old planks bending slightly as if protesting the burden. Evelyn's heart pounded. Every instinct screamed for her to act, to protect the land, the new homes, and the families now living downstream. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the trees. A plank shifted, water beginning to seep through the small gap. The dam was starting to give way. Evelyn grabbed her phone, calling Rachel, who was monitoring from the other side of the development. "The dam's failing." Evelyn shouted over the rain, "Get to higher ground. Call emergency services." Rachel's voice was urgent. Evelyn dashed up the muddy hill, her boots slipping in the wet earth. The new neighborhood below was already beginning to flood. Water surged through unfinished streets, pooling around foundations and creeping toward the houses. Some of the new residents stood helplessly, clutching belongings and watching their homes flood. Evelyn's chest tightened as she saw a young family carrying a child trying to move to safety. Despite the chaos, Evelyn felt a fierce determination. She knew the old dam had held long enough to give the community time to prepare. Now it was her turn to protect what she could. She sprinted to the community center, where a group of neighbors had gathered, using a megaphone borrowed from the Homeowners Association. Evelyn called out instructions: move to higher ground, avoid the flooded roads, and help those who needed assistance. Volunteers jumped into action, guiding elderly residents and helping families evacuate safely. Despite the sudden flood, no one was hurt. Evelyn's voice rang through the storm, steady and commanding. She moved with purpose, knowing the land was fighting back, but so was she. As the water continued to rise, Evelyn made her way back toward the creek. The dam had finally broken, releasing a powerful wave downstream. Trees were uprooted, fences swept away, and the earth was scarred by rushing water. But amid the destruction, something remarkable happened. Neighbors worked side by side, strangers helping strangers. Some brought sandbags, others cleared debris, and all shared stories and support as the floodwaters slowly receded. In the days that followed, the community rallied. Town officials finally acknowledged the seriousness of the situation, pledging to inspect and repair the dam properly and review construction practices to prevent future damage. Evelyn met with the Homeowners Association and developers, advocating for stronger environmental protections and a commitment to preserving what remained of the natural landscape. Her efforts sparked a renewed respect for the land, a reminder that progress and preservation could coexist when people work together. At night, Evelyn returned to the dam site, now a swollen, rushing stream. She thought about the history it held, the strength it had shown, and the lessons learned. The flood had tested the land and the people, but it had not broken their spirit. Evelyn knew there was still much to be done, but the stand they had taken had made a difference. The land was not just a place to live, it was a story of resilience, community, and hope. The morning after the flood dawned calm and clear. The sun peeked through a sky scrubbed clean by rain, casting warm light over Willow Creek. The air smelled fresh, filled with the promise of renewal. Evelyn Harper stepped outside her cabin and took a deep breath. The quiet, calm, a stark contrast to the chaos of the past days. The flood had left its mark, muddy patches where green once grew, fallen branches scattered like confetti, and the creek swollen and rushing faster than usual. But the land, resilient as ever, had begun its slow healing. Neighbors were already gathering. Their spirits lifted despite the damage. Its cleanup had started early, with everyone pitching in to clear roads, repair fences, and tend to battered gardens. What had been strangers before the storm were now a united community. Evelyn walked down the hill toward the new development, where the floodwaters had retreated, leaving behind pools of rain and mud. Some houses had suffered damage, but the foundations held. The site was a reminder of the delicate balance between human ambition and nature's force at the community center. A meeting was underway. Town officials, developers, and residents sat around a large table, faces hopeful and serious. Evelyn took her place among them, ready to share her vision for the future. She spoke about stewardship, caring for the land as a shared responsibility. She proposed creating a committee dedicated to environmental protection, sustainable development, and preserving the natural beauty that had drawn so many to Willow Creek. The idea was met with nods and thoughtful questions. The Homeowners Association committed to working closely with local experts and residents to ensure future projects respected the land's history and ecology. Evelyn also shared her plan to restore the old dam, not just as a functional structure, but as a symbol of balance between progress and preservation. She hoped to involve the community in its care, turning it into an educational site where children could learn about nature, water management, and the importance of protecting their home. Outside, a group of volunteers gathered to plant native trees along the creek's edge, helping to stabilize the soil and provide habitat for wildlife. Evelyn joined them, digging into the earth with a sense of purpose and hope. Over the following weeks, Willow Creek began to heal. The damaged areas slowly greened again, new friendships formed, and a shared respect grew between longtime residents and newcomers. The flood had been a harsh test, but it had also opened doors for understanding and cooperation. Evelyn often found herself walking the land at dawn, watching the sunrise paint the sky and listening to the creek's gentle song. She thought of her grandfather and the legacy he had entrusted to her, not just land, but a story of care and connection. The challenges were far from over. There would always be pressures to develop, to grow, to change, but Evelyn felt ready. With the community at her side, she believed they could find a way to honor the past while embracing the future. One afternoon, as she stood by the restored dam, now strengthened with new supports and surrounded by young trees, Evelyn smiled. The water flowed steadily through the creek, steady and calm, just like the resolve in her heart. The land had endured. The people had endured. And together, they were beginning a new chapter, one where respect for the earth and hope for the future walked hand in hand. As the sun dipped low, casting golden light over Willow Creek, Evelyn whispered a quiet promise. This land is home, and it will always be worth fighting for.